welcome Ben McLane, music attorney extraordinaire. Gee, I wish I had my applause box here. Anyway, give you a little
Everybody.
quick bio on Ben. He got his law degree from Pepperdine University School of Law in Malibu. Tough place to go to school. Undergrad degree in BS, Bachelor of Science from Kansas State University. Worked in legal and business affairs at Rhino Records and Priority Records, and head of business affairs CFO for JWP USA / BMG Records. He was also a talent scout, which you don't see on a lawyer's resume very often, for Sire Records. Seymour Stein, the founder of Sire, just passed away like a week or two ago. He was a one of a kind guy.
Yeah,
Um,
it was through Seymour actually that he was like the guy we'd take stuff to for sure.
Yep, he was one of a kind. Oops, let me kill that email so we don't hear dings the whole time we're doing this. All right.
And also at that time there was a guy named Andy Paley who you might know who was on the West Coast running Sire.
Yeah, never met Andy, but I knew who he was. Um, Worked at a management company called Tim Neese Management, where he worked represented Bruce Hornsby, the Posies, Ricky Lee Jones, Charlie Sexton, The Origin, Leon Russell, Grapes of Wrath, Big Star, Martha Davis, etc. Um, he's licensed to practice in all courts in the state of California and U.S. district courts. He's published over 200 articles on the music business in magazines, books, and blogs. Also an expert contributor to Rolling Stone and NPR. In 1995 and 2006, he won the Los Angeles Music Awards Attorney of the Year. That's a big deal. And he's got gold and platinum records for artists that he's worked with, like Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, platinum record for the Dixie Chicks, gold for Guns N' Roses, platinum for Cher, platinum for the Eagles, platinum for Jay-Z, gold for Glee soundtrack and for Selena Gomez. Just this is literally a very pared down list of people that he's worked with in one capacity, legal capacity or another. Weezer, 50 Cent, Doors, Puff Daddy, No Doubt, Eric Clapton, Rolling Stones, Bonnie Raitt, Cher, Eagles, J-Lo, Fish, Roots, Shaggy, Vladimir Horowitz, Willie Nelson, Ryan Adams, Ben Harper, Guns N' Roses, Jeff Beck, Flaming Lips, Sixpence None the Richer, Black Eyed Peas, Dixie Chicks, Bon Jovi, Diane Warren, Faith Hill, Madonna, Tim McGraw, Michael Jackson, Beyonce, and literally this was just a tiny little smattering. I see Curtis Blow on there. I actually did some records out of TK. I did an act. I produced an act called Wild Oats, the TK Studios in Hialeah, Florida, in the late '70s, if memory serves. And who's the guy that did Curtis Blow? He had another real life.
It was Russell Simmons was his original manager. Is that who you're thinking about?
No. Anyway, it's all
They
off
all
topic
said
anyway.
but yeah, Curtis Blow, if I recall, there was one of the early digital download companies, kind of like the Orchard when it started was a record label, first digital record label. But there was a kind of competitor of them, and they were trying to pick up a lot of kind of the old school hip hop
Yeah.
artists. Like we did like a one of the early digital download deals for him.
I know what
If
I'm
I
thinking.
recall, it's been a long time.
I'm thinking of an artist called Blowfly.
Oh yeah, he was from Florida. He was out of the TK bunch with
Yeah.
right.
And I actually worked with Henry Stone, who was
Henry
the
Stone. Yeah.
president. Yeah, I saw him on your resume. Anyway, um, so Ben and I were on a phone call yesterday, and I wished I'd recorded that because we're here to discuss AI, but neither of us are expert in AI. Really, practically nobody is an expert in where AI could go, will go, how it will be used. Everything is new, at least to those of us who are not like in that field and have been programming or experimenting or building stuff with AI for years already. But it's really exploded onto the scene in the last 30 days in such a big way that you can't ignore it. And I see all these people online pontificating about, well, it's going to do this or it's going to do that. And who really knows? But I wanted to get Ben's take, and I want to let you guys know this is not legal advice from Ben. This is just two guys in the industry talking about what the possibilities are, how things might pan out or might not pan out. Just trying to open your minds and get you a little more acquainted with AI. Um, yeah, I think the thing that worries every musician out there is, will I be replaced by a robot? Again, these are opinions. None of this is necessarily factual, certainly not legal, definitely not legal advice. Um, do you think that at some point that we won't need a bass player, we won't need a songwriter, we won't need a band, we won't need a producer? Do you think all that stuff could be wiped out by AI?
This again, yeah, there's no standards, industry standards on any of these things yet, or even laws. There's been a few lawsuits filed by major labels and things like that, but of course nothing's gone to court, and so we don't really know what the rules are all going to be on this or where it's going to go. But I mean, for me, the reason I got into the business in the first place is to work with artists, and artists obviously have to have a personality and an image and hopefully some kind of uniqueness about them. And that would include, performers, players, musicians also. I'm hopeful that if you still, the bottom line is the talent itself is going to rise above all of that, and that will always be needed. But there could be some more minimal type things that are more like background type things, certainly background instruments and things like that, tambourines, certain percussion sounds that maybe aren't as quite as unique, that certainly can be created by, and they have been for years actually, as we know, by robots or computers, and that's been incorporated into the business. But I think the major labels and everybody's more concerned about somebody copying somebody like Taylor Swift or Beyonce, and can they copy somebody like that to the point where nobody can tell the difference? You
And then
know,
there's the whole issue of maybe not copying, but creating a new entity, a robotic artist, if you will, that is not Taylor Swift, that could be competitive with Taylor Swift in her vein, in her lane. But are there legal issues? There are legal issues, and I think they're not all that clear yet, because it's not actually sampling Taylor Swift. And right now I'm talking about, not like creating a song with a Taylor Swift sound alike where you think it's Taylor Swift, but it's a robot. I'm talking about a brand new entity where a Taylor Swift song and maybe 20 other songs or 500 or 1,000 have been scraped for data, and the data has trained the AI. So you could say, open AI, create a song for me with an artist that would be in the same category as Taylor Swift, but doesn't sound like her singing it. And it's used little pieces of data sets that it's collected and trained itself with, or somebody has trained it over some period of time. And it's bringing all that stuff that it was trained on to bear. And the output is this song with a new artist. Um, what are the legal issues with the using those data sets from other artists as the training facility, if you will, for the AI to create something new and fresh?
well, I think the main thing labels probably would claim is there's infringement going on if somebody's trying to scrape or somehow copy or go to try to recreate something and just say it's inspired by, or and this has been an issue that's gone on with infringement in general. Sometimes you have something that's very close but it's not exactly there, and there's that blurred line. Is it like, is this really a ripoff, or is it just something that was supposed to sound close, and you can't, there's a line there that's hard. That's why there's lawsuits all the time. But the problem that I see with because when you're doing these scrapes, you're basically going into the entirety of the internet and drawing from everything that's out there. So I mean, and if you can prove, I suppose, to defend against an infringement claim that you used lots of other sources and not just Taylor Swift music, well then, it becomes like a hybrid thing of thousands or millions of different components
Right.
that might have been similar, but obvious. So I think that's a pretty good defense probably, because these are the first times I'm thinking about these things versus you just because heck, if I was trying to compete with, I remember many years ago when Alanis Morissette came out, and she was so big. I remember talking to an A&R person at Warner. I can't remember who it was, but they were saying, "Yeah, we've signed 7 or 8 female artists that kind of sound like her," because obviously they wanted to try to like piggyback on the success of that because there was a sound that was happening. Obviously, the singers and the artists didn't look exactly alike and probably didn't sound exactly like, but they were definitely in the same bag, right? So I don't know if there's that much difference between that what we're talking about now and just people going into their record collections and trying to find something that sounds close because you could catch the wave of something that's popular if you're similar to it. But as long as I'm just thinking out loud here, as long as the visual image is different and the vocal isn't exactly the same,
Or the
then
lyric content not exactly the
well,
same.
yeah, it's not going to be exactly the same, but you have issues with name and likeness too. If you're trying to copy somebody's look and even the sound of their voice, those could be violations of trademark, because there's some people that actually have trademarks they call it a sound trademark, like of their guitar tones or their voice. It's true for, I know, Bette Midler, Tom Waits, and I believe ZZ Top. Billy Gibbons has a trademark on his guitar sound. I don't know
Hmm.
how many people have that, and you don't have to actually register a trademark to have rights. Same with copyright. You just have to prove that it's like established and people associate it with you, that particular sound. So I mean, there's all these. So there's potential infringement issues, but also potential name and likeness trademark type issues that everybody's going to have to grapple with. But I don't know if this 8 made up artist that's made to compete is distinctive enough. I think they're probably going to be able to get away with it. And obviously, at the end of the day, the audience or the fans have to decide if they like that or not. I know there's already been some artists created by majors that are avatar or kind of a computer. They even look like avatars, but then none of them have caught on yet. And I'm assuming the music that was created was probably generated by AI to sound like something that would fit whatever was popular at the time. I don't know. Have you seen some of those
No,
articles?
I haven't, but I completely believe that you could look at the demographic that a certain real artist appeals to and then sort of deconstruct all the aspects using AI. Why does Taylor Swift appeal to a female audience that, like a Gen Z female audience? I'm guessing at that. I guess she appeals to a much broader spectrum, but you know what I'm saying, where they could
They're
literally,
going for the core, whatever the core audience
yeah,
is.
or just reverse engineer why an artist is popular. Let the AI do that by grabbing data sets. But that's one artist that is trying to mimic. Let's talk about,
But we know that labels they have these research
yeah,
departments where they've done that kind of stuff for years. I mean, to compile information to try to predict what would work and try to find artists that fit that mold. But obviously, it hasn't gone to the extreme it could now, where you've got somebody else that like a machine could create it for you.
right. It may do a really good job of reverse engineering what makes Taylor Swift appeal to her audience and then create something totally new. A new artist doesn't look like her, doesn't sound like her voice, is just creating music based on what appeals to her demographic. That feels like it would be kosher. It'd be no
I think it
different
would.
than
I think it
I'm
would
a,
be. But I think that's what people have always tried to do on a gut level.
yeah,
Just what they've known from their brains and their own research they could do. Of course, with the internet and Google and things like that, there's ways to do not as much as AI can do it because, as I mentioned, they could go back to the beginning of history all over the world through the internet. No, we can't. A person can't do that, but some people are pretty sharp as far as studying things for 30, 40, 50 years.
Let's talk about songs in particular, and then eventually I want to move on to instrumental music, specifically production music that's used like television shows, largely reality-based shows. But so for songs, you're absolutely right in saying that, look, even the Beatles, everybody draws on their own personal AI, whatever their life their musical life experiences have been, who they're attracted to, who they listen to. Oh, I love that guitar sound that that artist gets. It's going to have an influence on you. It would be impossible for a new artist to either consciously or subconsciously not draw on influences that who have influenced them for decades. So
Well, and before I forget, and sorry to sound like so, I just love the history of the music business, but I I remember in the on the oldie stations, you'll still hear like a Bobby V song or Sheila
Tommy
uh,
Rowe.
by Tommy Rowe. Those were total at the time when they first came out, they sounded like Buddy Holly. They even sounded, I thought it was Buddy Holly.
Yeah.
The vocals and everything, the producers made them sound like Buddy Holly, and the instrument, the percussion beat, everything was total ripoff of Buddy Holly. Now I don't remember if anybody raised hell about that back then, but it's, you know,
There weren't that many
it
music
was a little more
attorneys yet.
crude, but I mean, these kind of things have been going on a long time, you know. I mean, just the concept of, hey, that worked, let's copy it.
But there weren't as many attorneys. Maybe the laws weren't so sophisticated yet, or precedents weren't set with certain cases. So maybe what wasn't an issue in 1960 is very much an issue in 2023. I don't know. I'm definitely not a lawyer, much to my parents' chagrin.
Well, the biggest problem that because I've been trying to read some articles about AI, and what I guess one of the things that's kind of a side issue, but it's really important, is it allows, there's an unlimited, you know, you push a button, there's an unlimited amount of music that could be released, just like we talked about. I think we talked about the other day, maybe not, about, I think there's 60,000 or something uploads every day.
Hmm.
Spotify of just music out of, whether it's major labels or independent or people's, out of people's bedrooms. With AI generated music, it could, there's no limit on that. It could be millions of songs a day could go up online. How, and then if that goes on Spotify and places like that, it really dilutes the playing field. It makes it really hard to discover anybody if you're not famous already. So that's also a side issue, but it's more of just like, you know, like sand on the beach. Like, how do you get discovered now?
Well, I mean, that certainly exists now without even AI generating unlimited numbers. It's really, really hard. And, you know, musicians, and I understand why they think this way, tend to think the harder I work at writing a great song, the better my chances are, which certainly has an impact. There's no doubt that the quality of the music, the catchiness of a song has an impact on your possibilities of being discovered by an audience out there. But there's so much great music that we've all heard on Spotify that where we've never heard of the artist, and they'll never blow up and be big. And that's right now. I think the day may come where we're sitting and we're in our car, and rather than tuning into a radio station or XM or Spotify, that we'll just simply say, car, uh, create some songs that sound like they would appeal to Taylor Swift's fan base. And every song you hear is created uniquely in that moment for you and is not even up on Spotify or anywhere where anybody could
Oh,
download it,
you're
buy it.
saying you could, you're saying you could actually create it verbally by yourself on the fly? Is that what you said? What you
Oh
meant?
yeah,
Okay.
I really believe that that's going to be the case. I believe that the day will come where either through uh, you're a video editor, you're working on a reality show. The example I use, the one I always use, my viewers are going to laugh at this, but I always use Kim Kardashian trying to unscrew the cap off a gallon jug of milk, something she probably doesn't have to do all that often. And she's afraid she's going to break a nail or mess up her nail polish. And so the video editor laying in the music on that show would probably search for a quirky dramedy track. So now the video editor could just say, uh, computer or AI or whatever, find me a track that's appropriate for the scene. And the AI will already know that the scene is comedic based on the dialogue or the action in the scene. And over time, it will have trained itself to select music that's appropriate for that rather than the human editor going down a list of possibilities, looking at titles and auditioning. Oh, that title looks like it might indicate this is a quirky, funny piece. Play. Nope, not the right tempo. Play the next one because the title grabbed you. Close, but it didn't get big enough at the end, and so on. Whereas AI, you could just merely talk into your microphone in your edit bay and tell your computer to go find it because there are AI recommendation engines out there already that compare music to references rather than creating it. So I believe all these things are possibilities. I don't want to say that I firmly believe they will happen exactly as I predict or talk about today. But what about that eventuality that's a possibility that every piece of music could be a unique piece of music created in that moment for you based on your prompt, but yet it used data sets of music that has been scraped from decades past, maybe 1,000 or 1,000,000 or some unimaginable number of pieces of music. Who will own that music? Who owns the copyright on the composition? Is there a master if it's created as a one-off on the fly and not stored anywhere or replicated anywhere? So do master rights go out the window? There are all these issues that are
Well, from what I
mind-blowingly
understand, currently, if music is created by a machine, it's not, the Copyright Office doesn't recognize it as a legitimate copyright. So I don't think there's even a common law. So because of that, that's the thing. I don't. I mean, I guess it's still something somebody could say they own, and it could be monetized. But I don't think the government currently isn't going to recognize it as a copyright for like an infringement, because one of the main reasons you'd file for a copyright is so if somebody ripped you off, you could sue them and get damages and things like that. If it's not copyrightable, you probably couldn't go into court and sue somebody over it, but there's probably could still be contracts between parties. If you had something unique enough, somebody could license it or buy it or whatever. I mean, just like currently, that's how the business works. Music's either licensed or purchased between parties or users, you know?
So let's brainstorm that whole scenario a bit more. You're in your car, you're commuting home from your office, stuck on the 101. We've all been there. And you tell your AI radio or music thing in your car, um, create some music that sounds like it would appeal to Steely Dan fans. And all of a sudden, this music comes out and you find it very appealing. Does it sound like Steely Dan? No. But if you're somebody who loves that band, has gone to their shows and listens to their music decades after it was made, this music is equally as appealing, almost magically, but it's created in the moment from data sets uniquely for you. You could say, save that to my playlist. And now you've created a piece of music that is on your playlist. Hypothetically, you could then license it because you,
Yeah, well, that could be. Of course, most consumers, somebody's in a car, they have a different gig, you know. They're not
right.
thinking about how can I monetize this piece of music like music business exec people like us would, you know. So which is probably a very small segment of the population. Um, um, it was something you said had triggered something, but now I've forgotten. Maybe
Oh,
it'll come back.
you
Maybe
sound
it'll
like
come
my
back to
wife
me.
now. I say stuff that triggers her all the time. Well, when it
Yeah.
pops up, just wave your hand and I'll stop wherever I'm at so we can get that thought in there. But I think that that's a possibility.
Well,
Yeah.
but still, I guess it goes back and it could be just because of growing up, this is how it was. But when I was a kid, the reason I got hooked on music was I would usually hear something that I liked on the radio in those days, but then I would want to go buy the record and then if I saw some artist that I really liked visually or there was something about their personality or character, then I'd want to buy more music from them and go see them and buy their merchandise and things like that. Versus, I don't know how much of that goes on today, because we used to be able to look at albums and open up things and read all kinds of cool things, see lots of images, which a lot of the younger generation probably doesn't. It's just audio.
They're
It's just
probably
audio.
looking on TikTok or something
You
and,
know,
and
and
having
there
a
could be
similar.
the video aspect, yeah, either on YouTube or TikTok, which is not like a traditional type of MTV video. A lot of times, it's just some visual. But I don't know if so that's the because I still think that on the one of the saviors would be if the artist, if there's some uniqueness to the artist, not just some sound. that like fits a box, checks a box. But usually most artists or songwriters or producers, if they're successful, there's more to the package than that, you know. But and that's the so obviously not everybody makes it in the music business. Usually most of the time you have to be extremely talented and driven. Some people get lucky for other reasons, but I just don't know how much of this other stuff is going to just make it harder to get discovered, perhaps.
And let's talk about something that happened a couple of weeks ago, which was um, a well-known stock music library that I won't mention by name. I probably don't know all the facts. I hate talking about stuff where I don't know all the facts, but as I understand it, um, many musicians in probably what was a quarterly statement about 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, saw stuff where they were being paid for their music being used to form a data set. So let's say I am a production music composer. I do instrumental tracks, and I've taken my stuff that I couldn't get into maybe the higher level, higher quality libraries and put it into the stock music library, which is not unlike a stock photo library where people can go on and search and say, yes, I'll pay $5 for that or $50 or whatever, depending on the use. That library company made the decision to take their entire catalog, presumably, and make it available to some other entity to scrape every piece of music in that large catalog that I believe is probably in the 150 to 200,000 ish range of pieces of music. And they didn't let anybody know before it happened. They probably did have legal permission baked into their original
Yeah,
contract
probably
where it
did.
said, we can use it for virtually anything. So nobody could sue them or do a class action because without reading the stuff carefully, they signed an agreement that gave this company, permission to do this in the known universe or something like that. So now everybody's upset. I feel like I've been taken advantage of. My music was scraped. A data set was built from my music so that their AI could create my replacement in the future.
And of course, we don't know yet if that would be the ultimate consequence. We
Right.
just think it could be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All this is conjecture because we don't know anything. I mean, Napster was more clear than this is. And Napster was probably the last big upset in the music industry traditional model.
Right.
Um, so you and I had a really interesting discussion on the phone yesterday, which is okay, so let's say that this new piece of background music, production music is created, and it is a compilation of data to varying degrees and percentages from 513 different pieces of music that it looked at. And it took just a little bit from this and a little bit from that. And by the way, it didn't sample the tambourine. It just looked at it's a mid-rangey tambourine with like sounds like it's got 12 jingles and a wood rim. It's this kind of tambourine. So it looked at the data of the waveform, but it didn't sample it. It just recreated it based on that data. So our discussion yesterday was if a piece of music is comprised of 513 pieces of data, but one piece was 1/1000th of a percent of the data that was ultimately used. Another one was 2%, another one was 14%, another one was 73%. Is it possible that someday that's how people will get paid? That original human creators will create the content that becomes the stuff that creates data sets by being scraped, and that there will be some AI driven device or algorithm that looks at this stuff and says, well, Ben McLane's tambourine was a tiny little percentage of this, and Michael Laskow's bass tone and the way he attacks his instrument was a tiny little percent. And you and I would get paid based on what percentage of the
Yeah.
overall AI we were.
Well, I think we were just saying that maybe that's a potential, I don't, not a solution for all the issues, but maybe a way for people to make money. Of course, I'd call these micro transactions, or I'm not sure if that's the exact language, but It'd be micro, right?
Yeah.
But when you think about it over time, it could be that if a lot of things were even if it's a tiny, tiny fraction of 1/100th, 1/1000th, which is fractions of pennies. I mean, maybe if a lot of this stuff goes on, it does add up, but gosh, I don't know. I mean, and we don't know if it's going to affect the original version anyway. If that means that people don't want to license the original version, that was scraped. So yeah, that's the problem with all this is we don't really know where it's all headed. But I think that the production library might be shooting themselves in the foot because you know they're giving up potential like standard licensing fees for just selling their catalog and getting maybe some upfront blanket fee and then never anything else. I don't even know what kind of deal they
Right.
did.
They're creating their own killer.
Yeah, maybe, and obviously it's not good for the creators either. But usually, yeah, most of those you've seen the sync representation deals too, unless you specifically build in exclusions or restrictions. It's usually pretty broad what they can do, or some kind of approval rights. And of course, a lot of people never even would have thought of this 2-3 years ago when they did the deal, and maybe the language was just vague enough that it would allow for it, or maybe not. And by the way, there probably could be some class actions. If enough people are damaged by this, some lawyer is going to say, well, that was outside the scope of the intent of the agreement when they did it. All these people did it. So there could be some class actions going on just to see what happens.
Right.
I mean, I could see some lawyers thinking there's enough there. But again, I don't know what's going to happen and who you're suing, and are you just trying to make a point? Are you trying to make money on it? Because most of these sync licensing companies, if they got sued in a class action, would probably go out of business,
Right.
unless it was like Sony or somebody.
Yeah. And from a legal perspective, and you could certainly address this better than I, the standards, the legal precedents aren't set, and the statutes aren't written yet. And my observation is the wheels of legislation turn very, very slowly, yet AI is moving at a speed that's breathtaking. I mean, literally, in the last 30 days, I subscribe to a newsletter of all kinds of new AI stuff. And every single day, I get at least 5 new AI apps that I could be using to create video, to write papers, to create music, whatever you can think of. AI is doing it. Somebody said the other day, well, it won't be used to dig ditches. And I would disagree with that. Absolutely going to be used to use ditches. The AI is going to control the ditch digger, and you'll program in, I need a ditch dug from here to there, and it will keep itself on the straight and narrow and know how deep of a ditch it's digging. So you won't need a guy to drive the ditch witch machine anymore.
Well,
All
yeah,
that.
it crosses, of course, into other areas like art and film and TV and all that script writing. But even I just heard the other day on the radio. I haven't seen it with my. I was just in Las Vegas, but I didn't see it. But apparently, there's 3 McDonald's now in the U.S. that are totally robotic. They don't have one human being in there to take the orders to make the food. I don't know how they do it.
I saw a coffee place. I went through San Francisco Airport, SFO, probably last November, December. And I think there was a strike going on of the people who were the servers in all the restaurants and bars and coffee shops at that airport, maybe citywide, I don't know. So it was really hard to get a cup of coffee in that airport at that time, even like at the, American Airlines lounge or wherever, because nobody could serve it. There was a robotic coffee kiosk, literally with an arm that's like, it didn't look like a person. It looked like something that would spray a body panel in an auto paint shop. And it was making coffee, and the coffee was pretty darn good. And the thing was pretty darn fast. And it was just only marginally more expensive than if you bought a coffee at a
What
Starbucks.
about that? What about the timing? Was it quicker as far as taking the
Equally
wait?
as fast, if not a little faster. I mean, there was only one robot, but if you had 4 of them behind one counter, the line was pretty long, but that's because you couldn't get coffee served by a human anywhere else in the airport.
But
So,
but that goes back, I think, to how complicated something is. Something like making coffee. By the way, I saw a kiosk like that about 5 years ago in San Francisco, right on Market Street. they had one. It was like just a pop-up kind of thing. So that's
Yeah.
been around. But then it's something like, if you know, some like flambe or some like fancy steak or whatever. I don't know, like what, like like Gordon Ramsay would make. Like, what can those things be recreated with robots? Maybe, I don't know. That's probably way down the line, but I don't know.
They're
But
doing
it's pretty
surgery with
mind-boggling to think.
robots. If they can open up a human being's brain, I'm sure they can
Yeah.
flambe something.
Yeah. I guess I don't, and that's, so, and we don't want to be doom and gloom people, but my biggest concern was just like, well, gosh, if a computer does everything for everybody, then nobody would have any job or gainful employment. That doesn't seem possible.
I know. Did
So
you ever
so
see
it's
the
probably
movie?
like Napster, how eventually the music business caught up to the internet and downloading and found a way to try to harness it, rein it in, or partner with it. So, and that's where streaming came from. And that's obviously benefited the major labels because they have millions of tracks that constantly are earning, that's hard to break out, if you're new, but I'm sure there's going to be a way to harness this, and people are going to find a way to do it where it's equally beneficial. Hopefully, I did see some interesting things. I see Grimes. I don't know if you saw that, but Grimes
Yeah.
already has said, "Hey, you can use my vocal in any kind of. You could recreate, do whatever you want in AI and add lyrics, whatever. But as long as you use my vocal, we'll just split the money that you make if you make anything." So she's already saying, go ahead and use it in any kind of AI fashion, as long as I'm giving you permission. So there's sort of a license there. The other interesting thing I saw was AI can, and I just going through this now with a client who's making some music for an Indian film, but he's going to sing it in English, but then they want to have like a Hindi version in India. But now I guess you could have AI just make the Hindi version. You don't have to actually have a human do the I guess the phonetic re-record.
Same thing would be true for doing foreign language versions of films and TV shows. Absolutely.
Yeah, the dubs and things. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I don't, but still the original version, it still things of the source of that. It's still, hopefully there's still some value in that, and people will still be, somebody will still think they have value. I don't know. But anyway, so I can't say any more than that, because I certainly don't want to be negative about it, because we all work in the business. So we got to find there has to be positives to it so we can all keep going here.
And
And
on the legal end of things, and again, I know this will be strictly conjecture because there's nothing to really base it, it's just an opinion based on maybe history, but because legislation generally lags way behind innovation and technology, do you think that we'll have a period of the Wild West over the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever that time period is, till legislation can catch up? And let's say it's 5 years. 5 years from now, everything is codified. Bunch of statutes that allegedly make it crystal clear, and we know what all the legal ramifications are of everything we've spoken about so far. Will it be retroactive? So people who are participated in the Wild West in one form or fashion using AI to create music or data sets that came from, I don't know, Eric Clapton, whatever. Will those statutes, do you think, act retroactively? So everybody who created music in the Wild West period of AI music creativity or visual arts or whatever, will the statutes allow people to go back and say, okay, all that has to come off the radio or Spotify, or needs to be destroyed because it was created illegally, but it wasn't created illegally because the statutes didn't exist
yeah,
at the time?
yeah. Well, I mean, that obviously that would be either built into the statute or not. So we don't. And the reason it takes so long for, and because I don't, I'm not involved in legislation or anything like that. But when I follow these things, why they take so long, obviously there's always two sides. There's always two sides, because in this case, though, it would seem like the creator side and the labels and the major companies are have a lot more clout than whoever's on the other side arguing for the AI. But maybe those are all the tech companies that are like making this software, these apps they're sending to you. I'm just even wondering how are those companies making money? I mean, you could come up with some software and then you let people license it or give it to them for free, and then everybody uses it for free. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
Because
it could be that
but there's
Apple
always
or
there's usually a lot of battling with all these all these politicos, and everybody's arguing their side before they finally get in front of the legislature. But if something's really going to damage the public interest enough, I believe the legislature would move quicker, probably some kinds of emergency type things. But when they cobble these things together fast, who knows if they're really going to be sewing it up properly. And in the meantime, the court systems, because I know the major labels have already sued to have like that weekend track taken down, and sued some of these AI companies saying you're copying our artists. It's infringement. But none of those cases have gone to trial or anything. So
I wouldn't want to be the judge or the jury when they do. Um, and how might this affect PROs? How might this affect Harry Fox? I mean, we can only guess at this point because tomorrow AI itself could come up with a brilliant way to use AI to be a purveyor of music that eliminates the need for a record company, a distributor, an online distributor, a radio station, a Sirius XM, a Spotify. All those things could be wiped out if we go to that model, which I came up with on the fly. I'm sure I heard it somewhere, where you're sitting in your car and you say, make me some music that would appeal to a fan of Steely Dan. And it doesn't actually necessarily even sample data sets, or I should take the word sample, it doesn't even use data sets from Steely Dan, or maybe they're one of 5,000 artists that it comes from, because they certainly had influences. Um, so
Well,
if that's the
but,
case,
but
maybe
the
your
weird thing
car,
about it to me, it's like
yeah.
you want to copy Steely Dan or Taylor Swift or Beyonce or whoever it is, but those artists originally had to become famous because they had fans that loved them, adored them, and wanted to. So, I mean, if you're just creating fake music that's has no face to it, I just don't see how far. I don't. Where are the new artists going? I still think most people, young people, would want to discover some new artists they could have some real connection to.
Or
I mean,
maybe they just,
maybe I'm even too idealistic about it, because obviously, if you're just somebody that wants to use some sync production music with a certain sound in the background of a scene as cheaply as possible, yeah, but that doesn't represent the majority of music fans, I don't think.
well, maybe the fans would get a big kick out of, I created this. It's my creation based on the prompt that I gave the microphone in my car while I was stuck on the 101, and you hear it and you go, um, AI, yes, I like that, but try it with a female vocal. Try it with a female vocal with a little country twang. And you keep adjusting it till you come up with something that goes, I'm in love with this thing I just created. AI, share it with all of my friends. And maybe each individual is their new own personal record label.
It could be it could be. Well, if it goes back to what we talked about, if there's some way that you could tag and have a digital fingerprint or whatever it is, where you're if there's any piece of some original copyrightable material that's in there, that at least the creators will get paid in all these other versions. Because that's the good thing about user generated content on the internet, with YouTube and people getting ad revenue.
Mhm.
Because you make one video, if you're an artist, and maybe it's not that, maybe it gets 1 million views, but because of that, then you've got 50 million user generated videos that also use your music, and that there's advertising around that, and then you get a percentage of all the other videos that weren't even created by you. So there's actually a benefit to that sometimes, if there's a way to tag it back to the original version. So there's gonna have to be some way that, and I'm sure it's easily going to be created to do that. But you know I, but we just haven't heard anything about these things yet, because it's so
I'm
new.
sure
'Cause
somebody in Silicon Valley, or a
well,
14-year-old
somebody's doing
with
it,
a
because
Mac
I'm sure that
laptop is
I'm sure the
figuring it
major
out.
labels are already talking behind the scenes, like, well, yeah, we could sue everybody, but we're going to have some other way, some plan B here, just in case.
Yeah, they can't repeat their approach to the Napster situation when it popped up, which was try to sue them into oblivion. Technology marched forward with them or without them, even though they controlled the artists that Napster was giving away. Let's move to another subject, and that thank you for that conversation. Many of us are thinking about this stuff, and hopefully we'll all still be alive to watch wherever it goes, and hopefully there's a place in there for original music creators to be part of the new landscape out there. Let's talk about the old landscape before we wrap this up, which is um, buying loops and using many of the production music libraries that are Taxi's clients and end up signing Taxi composers. Um, to one degree or another will say, and I don't want anything with loops. And some of the composers or creators would say, yeah, but I bought a license to this thing from the company and it gave me carte blanche. I can use it any way I want. But yet libraries don't want to get involved. And I'm not clear because there's so many opinions as to why libraries don't want it. Most of them just like, I know it's trouble, just don't put any loops in your stuff. Why is it trouble? I don't know. I just know it's trouble because other libraries are doing it. And I've heard the advice that if you use a sample, even though you're using it legally and you can do anything you want with it, make sure that it doesn't appear in the clear, like in a bridge or a musical breakdown, where all of a sudden your original content created around it and woven into it make it unique. Now all of a sudden you're using that Apple loop that you have every right to use, but for just one bar, 4 beats, that kick drum is in the clear. That's not yours to monetize because it came from Apple. I understand this stuff, but I don't have a deep understanding. Can you elucidate um, some of the key points, maybe, and help me and maybe some of our other viewers that
Well, I
don't?
haven't. Yeah, I guess I haven't encountered. I'm obviously if you're using like a really recognizable or what seems to be a recognizable like vocal, a featured vocal, or some featured type of guitar lick, or some kind of drum percussion, you know, that's like a sound that's fairly well known, or you think it is, as opposed to just like what I call de minimis sometimes, just like
Doesn't really matter.
yeah, it's very short, it's background, it's shaking of a tambourine, it's a snare sound or whatever. It's those kind of things nobody's ever gonna I mean, and they're been recreated through every track of all time's got something like that in it. So I don't it's like really hard to say you're ripping somebody off or there's going to be an infringement there. So I to me it seems like maybe some of these music supervisors might be like being overly cautious or paranoid and for if for because most in my experience most of these loops are things like percussion sounds, keyboard sounds, but they're very generic kind of sounding things. So I don't know, I didn't know, I haven't really encountered, maybe because you work more actually in the sync world maybe than
Right.
I do. I mean, I do a lot of contracts for people when they're getting their music licensed, but and usually there's stuff in there saying, hey, you have to warrant and represent that you didn't, infringe anybody. You have no, and or it will say any samples have to be cleared, and that goes back to what people are saying. Well, yeah, I got this loop pack, and it said everything in here is cleared, and I can use it any way I want, and you don't have to pay me anymore, and or credit me or give me. And so I don't and there's probably a lot of music out there that we're hearing on TV and film that have those things in there, and nobody. There's no issue. So I'm not. But are you saying that a lot of people are getting their music rejected because they've used it, or is this a few isolated
No,
parents?
it's somewhat common.
Somewhat common. But
Um,
but there must be are the music supervisors or the end users, are they just are they giving a rationale for it? It's like
the
what
library, it's more
we
the
think we're
music.
going to get sued for that.
Yeah, it's more the production music libraries that are just being super careful because there's if you open the door a little bit to those types of uses, folklore, the game of telephone, um, incorrect representation from one musician to another, opinions, all those things contribute to, well, I thought you could use it like this.
Yeah.
No, you can't. You didn't read the fine print. If you would have, it was laid out legally. So now the libraries are worried that those bastardized opinions that are like a game of telephone that change from one generation to the next, will cause, even though they could make a carve out and say, well, it's okay if you do it like this, or if you use something like that, or your contract with that company that you got it from stated this. Most people aren't going to check the terms and conditions, the vast majority are not. And so the libraries are being wisely cautious and making sure to just blanketly say, no loops. That way I don't have to worry about it. Because some people say, but I thought this loop was kosher when it really wasn't.
Okay,
Because they,
well, and that's commerce, and if that's the game, you just have to take your loops out or make them yourself. But I probably a lot of people slip those loops in and never tell anybody or never even think and or just represent it's cool and nobody ever challenges them on it because ultimately there's really no claim. Who's going to make the claim? Because whoever gave them the loop pack said you could use it. You know,
yeah,
the problem I see it's more in the pop music world. So because people go get these beats online and that maybe the beat maker licensed the beat to 30 different people and so it's in 30 different songs that potentially could get on the Billboard charts or get picked up by a major label and then all of a sudden when the major label puts it out they find out there's another competing track out there that has that same recognizable beat or the hook and then they've got a competing version and that kind of defeats the whole purpose. They thought they had something original. So what I found more about is when you're, when because we do a lot of, sample licenses and beat licenses deals because I work with a lot of producers that are just beat makers basically, and and people find their beats at the beat side. So you have to warrant and represent. Yes, I've already licensed this beat to 3 or 4 different people. Here's who they are. Or no, this beat's never been licensed. It's original. You can have an exclusive on it. I'll never license it to anybody else again. Or, hey, I'm going to license this to other people. This is a non-exclusive use. You just have to know that going in. So I don't, and so but I've definitely have seen some labels have issues where all of a sudden they didn't know that they licensed a beat that was already out there because somebody wasn't transparent about it.
yeah, I could see the potential where a major artist goes to one of the loop libraries, of which there are many, and there's some that are very well known and well thought of, and I'm sure that tens of thousands of people a month go there and license stuff, and on an exclusive, and a major artist, somebody who's producing a major artist, the producer licenses the beat, puts it in the track, they've got an exclusive, and then the beat maker says, oh, this one's popular. I've had a lot of people inquire about it. And look at that. Jay-Z licensed it for his next record. I'm going to take the kick, the snare, and the hi-hat and the tambourine from that loop. And now I'm going to add a cowbell and I'm going to change the hi-hat figure a little bit. Is there any sort of barometer as to how different a loop, a beat loop has to be so that it no longer infringes on that
I
original.
don't. There's no black and white, but I think it's just more of a case by case thing. And if you're changing the loop and trying to, muddy it up or mash it up, you just have to do it enough to where it's not. It's just different enough, or even transformed, or whatever they call it. And
Mhm.
like that's like almost like a fair use type of defense. If you can transform something enough, then it's not the original anymore. But I don't know. That's why there's lawsuits, of course. But I haven't really seen that many in the. I haven't seen that many about like in the production music world yet. Maybe it's just too low level. I've only seen these lawsuits where it's a big song.
Yeah, well, of course, in production music world, you could have 13 seconds of an instrumental track play in a reality show, and it might only generate, it's not going to generate a sync fee up front, generally speaking, and it might only generate $2.71 over the course of its first year out there in the wild. So I couldn't even pick up the phone and say, hi, Ben, for $2.71. There's no point in bringing a suit. But you said something very key, which is mashing it up. I forget the terminology used, but yeah, changing it enough. And that's what some libraries will say is if you're going to use loops, they have to be substantially modified so that they're unrecognizable from the original. And some people I've heard discuss it say you could change the speed, you could change the pitch, you could change both of those things. You can add other instruments on top of it. You could get the MIDI file, and take some of the beats out of it. That's what I was wondering from a legal standpoint. Is there any sort of precedent as to how substantially something has to change so that they don't have to be worried? And you're right, it's going to be a very different lawsuit if it's a Jay-Z record versus something where Kim Kardashian's trying to get the cap off the milk container in a reality show.
But what I don't understand is if somebody licenses or buys a loop that has unrestricted use and it's sample free or whatever, and there's no clearance issues, who that party that licensed the loop in the first place would have the claim against the film company or the TV company that put out the end product that it contained it because somebody incorporated it. So if they don't care, why does the music supervisor care? Because there's really, I don't know who's making the claim. It's not like they ripped off,
It might
Justin
be
Bieber
the
or Ed Sheeran or something. Those people, yeah.
that was good timing on that one, Ben.
Well, they just come to mind because Ed Sheeran just went through this thing. But if it's just like some generic sound effect, I don't. And it was licensed properly, and you can show, hey, I've got proof that the source of it said you could use it any way you wanted, no restrictions. I don't understand who's making the claim.
The person who created the original and licensed it to the end user could make a claim, in my opinion, although I didn't go to law school, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn once. Um, they could make a claim if the thing they created is played in its original form in the clear. Now it's their music they created that is the thing that the public is hearing. But you're right. They created a broad, universal, like you can use this thing for anything license. So you're right. That would seem like it would stop the claim dead in its tracks, right?
Well, that's what I would argue, I suppose, but I don't know. I don't know. That's why I'm thinking maybe these music supervisors are being a little overcautious. But hey,
It's
it's
actually
just
it's the libraries
the
more so
library,
than the
yeah,
suits. Yeah.
or the libraries themselves. But in reality, I'm just wondering how honest and transparent people are with, like, when they sign these deals. They're probably like, well, whatever, because I always focus more on like the featured sounds, the vocals,
Hmm.
and the bridge, the hooks, and the harmonies, all these kind of things, not so much just these percussive sounds and a little bass pluck or something on a
Right.
string. I don't know, but that's just me, I just didn't know how deep these people go on analyzing things like that.
Everybody's worried about a lawsuit, and it's just easier to say, I'm going to pass on that instrumental cue than take any chance on getting sued someday. And frankly, as you well know, the deeper the pockets of the players in the chain of events are. So ultimately, if it's on a major cable net or a major broadcast net, somebody might sue, saying, "Hey, my beat was in the clear for 4 measures in the middle of that breakdown. That's my music out there. You didn't take it, add anything, and maybe there was fine print in their broad license that said you can use this in any way you want as long as you are not putting it out there
Yeah,
in
yeah, and
clear."
that's right, and that's why you have to look carefully at, how is it really a blanket type situation? Are there some strings attached in the fine print? Because most people don't read that. But when I've gone on behalf of clients and looked at some of these beat, or these sample pack, whatever's thrown into someone these days, there's no package in there, but you know how it used to be, you'd buy something, there was like a little sheet of directions or instructions or something in a little pamphlet, but now it would just be something you would click, terms and conditions or something. Most 9 times out of 10 people don't read that stuff, but even when you do, it's sometimes whoever wrote them, I found it's like gobbledygook. Sometimes it's not clear. It isn't.
Well, and a lot of people don't want to pay Ben McLane whatever your hourly rate is, and have you create something for them because they'll just Frankenstein it from contracts they've received in the past. and use a clause from this one and a clause from that one. I'm sure that I hope you agree with me on this, that a lot of times those clauses will contradict each other because they don't know what the hell they're copying
Well,
and
yeah, and
pasting.
that's what I'm saying. Even a lot of these terms and conditions that were created by, I assume, by lawyers or smart people, I found they're very contradictory. Or somebody could, on both sides could say, "Hey, I have broad rights," or "No, there's some restrictions there." See, but it's the interpretation of it. So I don't know, but I haven't. I guess I haven't had that many difficulties seeing lawsuits involving production music. So, but I'm
Yeah.
not a litigator, just so you know. I mean, I'm more of what you call a transactional lawyer, and I deal with contracts. And obviously, I try to follow famous lawsuits and things like that, so we can avoid pitfalls in contracts. But I don't really follow all the day to day, what's out there and people suing each other until you hear about it like in Billboard or something.
Well, this has been great, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And I'm sure our members will appreciate it as well. Well, actually, it's not just our members; the public will get to see this on YouTube as
Oh,
well.
great.
And I'd like to ask the people viewing this to drop your comments in the comment section below. And if Ben is amenable to this, I will assemble those comments into a follow-up show that we'll do live, some live Q&A, maybe at some point later this summer, or maybe even at the road rally. But I,
Still doing that in November. That hasn't changed the
right,
timing.
yeah, first this year is November 2nd through the 5th. But this is going to get people closer to the legal world of the music industry than they've been in a very long time, I have a feeling, because it is something that even though we've all known it was coming, it's always been like in the background. And but now all of a sudden it's like knocking on the front door and can't be ignored anymore.
But I encountered this maybe about 2 years ago, and maybe everybody else did too. Like when the NFT thing hit,
Yeah,
overnight, that's all anybody was talking about for a couple months, and then it just sort of died down a little bit, or just sort of become, and that's not over. That story's not over, and but it just sort of died down a little bit, or somehow it got incorporated into the fabric of how we do things. So maybe this will be the same way, but certainly 6 months from now we'll know a lot more, I would assume, than we do now. I don't, but
even
or
six
maybe we'll
days
be
from
more
now.
confused. Maybe we'll be more confused by then. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew. I'm just, a lot of things I'm saying here, I'm sure Michael too, we're just using logic and common sense based on what we know, as opposed to what maybe is really going to happen.
Yeah, who knows? It's impossible to predict at this point. All we can do is conjecture and guess, but that's good. We want to get everybody thinking about it so that maybe people are not caught by surprise someday, or maybe somebody watching this little segment will come up with some brilliant piece of software that will be world changing for the entire music industry, or maybe a lawyer that's a litigator will watch this and go, I never thought about that, and find a way to bring a class action suit against all the companies that might be scraping data when they shouldn't be, or something. Ben, what's your website for your law firm?
It's just my name.com, Ben McLane, BenMcLane.com. And if it's okay, I think you said a couple of years ago I did write a book
Oh,
called
yes.
Music Business in 10 Easy Lessons, which you can get it on Amazon either as a paperback or a download. So and I got a little flyer here if anybody's interested. Um, so I always like to plug that, but it was written more for entry level people. Kind of the things over the years I've always found that come up over and over and over again. So I just made a book about the 10 most popular things that I thought you should want to know about if you're just getting into the business.
If you want to send me a couple, I'd be happy to use them as giveaways during my live shows on YouTube, and I will add it to our recommended reading list on our website. Which, frankly, I've always wondered if people actually went there or not and looked at, because nobody reads anymore. It's like everybody watches YouTube videos or TikTok, and surprisingly enough, we got some complaints recently from people saying, "Do you know some of the books on your list are out of print?" So
Wow.
we went in and edited the list. I don't know if it's been updated on the site yet, but I will add your book to the site if it's
Like these kind of books, these self-published books on Amazon, they're just there on demand. So it's like
right.
it doesn't really ever go out of print. But I suppose, yeah, maybe some. I don't know, even like I wonder how Passman does it now. I guess he still just makes hard copies of his because his was like the
Not
first one.
He probably does print on demand now. I remember I published Robin Frederick's songwriting books, and the first one that I published, I had to buy a couple pallets of those books and send them to Amazon warehouses. And if I remember correctly, it was like $35,000 to print a couple pallets of books. It was a lot.
Yeah.
And now it's all print on demand. Um,
Yeah, so that's good for. I mean, obviously anybody can write a book now. So,
yep.
but I guess, but yeah, but Slaughter's like, hey, could Chat GPT, write this same book? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, so that's again that now we're talking about competing with authors and all kinds of other things too. So it's like the
Yeah.
can of worms.
I use GPT to come up with some titles for production library music because titles are very important in what the editors pick when they're in a hurry and looking for that piece of music when Kim can't get the cap off the milk container. The thing that, the title that tells you what the music is probably going to sound like is a great title. And I was having a hard time finding examples of great titles in many of the libraries I was looking at, big libraries. And so just for kicks, I asked ChatGPT to create some for me. And after I figured out how to prompt it better, it was creating like B plus to A minus titles in 10 seconds.
But
And
you were just typing in a description of kind of
yeah,
what you.
I would literally type in create titles for dramedy music, instrumental dramedy music for reality television.
But how specific? But that's as specific as you got, and you got great titles, or you had to be.
I got reasonably good on the first couple passes, and then I would say add more humor or add more of take a more descriptive approach so that the title is reflective or descriptive of the actual music. And then, it would say, well, I can't do that without knowing the music. So I would describe the music as um, goofy, quirky, comedic music that might have a tuba or calliope in it. And the more I thought about, garbage in, garbage out, the better my garbage in was, the better the titles it spit back out to me.
Yeah, that would make sense. But and I'm more familiar actually with the creation of the art like that DALL-E or DALL-E or whatever you call
Hmm.
it. Just typing in because I've done this for client or help them. Type in some description of some artwork you want. Boy, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it
But
is.
they'll give you 10 samples of things, and maybe none of them work or whatever. But it's just like it definitely comes up with some interesting options.
Yeah, the first thing I asked it to do was create a flying pig in taxi cab yellow with checkers on it. And
Yeah.
I got to say, the image that came out the other end, I almost wanted to make it our new logo. It was really good.
But then there was probably other examples that were contained those elements, but looked like nothing you would have expected, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, well, this has been a great discussion. And I apologize that we don't stay in closer touch, but we have known each other for, I don't know, probably 15, 20 years at this point. And always a pleasure to speak with you. And just thanks. I mean, I know this could have been a billable hour for you. So thanks for doing it.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
again, to the viewers, drop your comments in the comment section, and Ben and I will find one way or another to address the best questions that we find there.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ben McLane.
Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.